Good morning, everyone. How is everyone? We doing all right? A little bit of a brisk morning out there in Calgary, Alberta. See a few toques in the house. Yep. It's kind of that time of year. Well, I'm glad you're here this morning. We're week 2 of the Bible. You know, I remember when I was young, I don't know exactly how old I was, but I got my first Bible. This isn't my first one. But I remember, I think it was my mom that gave me it, and I grew up in church. I grew up reading the Bible, hearing the stories, Bible stories all the time, whatever. But I remember being given my first Bible, and I remember this level of excitement about being able to kind of go, whoa, I'm old enough to kind of start reading this thing on my own. And I was looking forward to kind of jumping into it and reading some of the stories that I'd heard and learning about some of the other stuff that maybe they hadn't talked about in my classes growing up, my Sunday school class. I was just like, yeah, time for me to kind of dig into some spiritual mysteries and learn this thing. Anyone here ever remember being given a Bible for the first time as a kid? Was there very many? Okay, there's a few. Oh yeah, their hands are going up. Well, I remember the first time I tried reading this thing when I was young and kind of trying to make sense of some of it. It looked different than what I was told in my Sunday school class. I was a little lost. In fact, it just read a lot different than I was expecting. I was kind of expecting it to all kind of leap out of the pages, and some of it was just really weird, confusing. In fact, I didn't know what it was talking about. Anyone ever had that experience? You step in, you're going, okay, I'm going to give this a shot. And after 5 or 10 minutes, you're going, okay, I got nothing. There's no inspiration leaping off. God isn't, the light from heaven isn't shining down. I'm just like, okay, what do we do with this? That, over the years, as a pastor, I've talked to more people who have said, oh, I've tried reading that thing. No thanks. That thing is just plain out weird. It's amazing how many people have been disconnected from the Bible. In fact, I've had people, when they've come in, they're going, like, how much do you guys talk about the Bible? Because, I got scar tissue. Times when I went to church in my past and they start quoting, and then it just loses me. A lot of people have been disconnected. A guy named Pete Enns, he wrote a book called How the Bible Actually Works. And in fact, we're using this book in different ways for this series as kind of an outline. But he points out 3 things that everyone he thinks should understand about the Bible if they're going to read it. One is it's ancient. It was written thousands of years ago. And it talks about stuff that, to be honest, a lot of it, they're talking about stuff that was applicable in that day and age. They're going to use different words, describe different things that were commonplace at that time that are not commonplace now. It's ancient. Secondly, it's diverse, he says. It doesn't speak from one voice on most subjects. Rather, there are many voices. Vince talked about this last week. There are many authors of books in this that make up the Bible. Different authors that were writing at different times, who were writing from different places in the world, under different circumstances, and were writing books within it for different purposes. So you can go from one book to the next and go, this book doesn't sound anything like this one. What the? Thirdly, he says it's ancient, it's diverse, it's written from many different perspectives and people, and it's ambiguous. By ambiguous, he meant the Bible doesn't really lay out for anyone what to do or think, at least far less than most people realize, which can be confusing. Because I grew up in a tradition where they talked about the Bible as being kind of like this instruction manual for life. Almost like God from heaven kind of sent by divine fax machine this thing and just said, look it, life is confusing. So let me help you. I'm going to guide you in how you're supposed to live. So I know that there's people that believe, when they can just go to the topical index at the back here, see these different words. What does it have to say about climate change? Let's see here. What about parenting? Throw me a bone here. I'm needing some help. Human sexuality. Where do you talk about that? I'm trying to figure out whether I should marry this person. Can you throw me a bone here? Marriage, selection, buy or rent, vegan, keto. It's almost like there is this picture of God or this spiritual intelligence up there that is hovering over us as spiritual beings, wanting to make sure you don't make the wrong mistake. And so we're gonna give you very specific guidance through this thing as to what exactly you need to be doing day in and day out. Look to the Bible for guidance. And he's going to tell you, no, don't do that. Do this. Nope, not him. Him. All right, whatever. Not that house, this one. But if you tried reading it, you know more often than not, the Bible can be very vague. There's this verse in Proverbs for all the parents out there that are wanting, throw me a bone, man. If you got teenagers and you're just like, oh no, I think I've screwed something up. Help me out, God. Here's a verse. Train up a child in the way that he should or she should go, and they won't depart from it. Okay. Which way? Where does it talk about screen time? What kind of music should they be allowed to listen to? Am I supposed to allow her to leave the house wearing that? Where is that? Okay, Johnny's asking if he can have a beer. He's 14. Do you talk about that? I don't. Just train them up in the way that they should go. It's like, I need details, man. It's ambiguous. It's vague often. And then sometimes it goes from that real ambiguity to giving a little piece of advice that I'm not sure I want. Like this one in Proverbs. Don't withhold discipline from your child. If you beat them with a rod, they will not die. Okay. Actually, there have been times where I'm like, thank you, God. Thank you. How many parents out there, how many of you were raised with the little corporal punishment? Yes, okay. So as a parent, I start off giving it to my first kid, going, look I got it, you're getting it. And he was a strong-willed child, and it seemed like, man, as much as I could dole out, he was like, is that all you got, Dad? It was like, no biggie. But then my second child came along, and he was acting up. I gave him a swat, and he literally came apart, cried his eyes out. I'm like, oh my God, I think I've damaged him. I never spanked him again. I'm just like, well, okay, I'm not going to beat him with a rod. So sometimes, or how about this one? Deuteronomy 21, if someone has a stubborn and rebellious son who does not obey his father and mother, and he will not listen to them when they discipline him, this is what you're to do. His father and mother shall take hold of him and bring him to the elders at the gate of the town. Then all of the men of his town are to stone him to death. Oh, ay, ay, ay. You know, sometimes the advice the Bible hands out wouldn't be appropriate in every circumstance, or even allowed for that matter. You'll end up in prison if you follow some of its advice. You see, when you look at how it seems the Bible behaves, it doesn't seem to expect people at all times and all places to follow every piece of advice it offers. Not sure it was ever written for that purpose. It almost expects you to use your brain a bit. You know, lately, we've been putting these Facebook ads out promoting Friends Church. I don't know, maybe you've come across them. Vince comes up with them, and sometimes I'm like, oh, no. They're out there. You know, we're a church for people who don't fit church. But these ads tend to bring out the spiritual police, like the religious police who will read them and go, whoa, world, avoid this place like the plague. They're the bad guys. And they'll read something that we're promoting, you know, even just church for people who don't fit church. Or come as you are, no changes needed. You know, really what we're trying to say is, we're not going to try to fix you the second you walk in. Just come on in. Oh, people get upset. So then they comment. Oh my God. Sometimes they comment in the most condescending. Sometimes I'm reading these comments, I'm going, oh, I'm gonna respond to that guy. Has anyone ever sat there looking at something someone's written or something you posted ever, and you're just thinking, I am going to give you a piece of my mind, but I'm sitting there weighing this out. What's the right answer here? What should I say? Wouldn't it be nice if you could find a verse that could just offer a little divine guidance for that? Like, God, throw me a bone. Universe, what am I supposed to say to those kind of people? Actually, you know what? There are verses. Why are you laughing all of a sudden? Tee up. No, actually, I'm serious. There are. Look at this one in Proverbs. Do not answer fools according to their folly, or you will be a fool yourself. Oh. Yeah, that's wise. Don't answer them, or you'll fall into that same game. The problem is the very next verse says, answer fools according to their folly, or they will be wise in their own eyes. I'm just like, wait, what? Hang on. Don't answer fools, answer them. So which one is it? What rule about responding to appropriate comments or inappropriate comments is right? You see, if you're looking to the Bible as some kind of specific black and white rule book that just says, do this, not only will you be frustrated, but you will actually miss the wisdom that lies within its pages. You see, the truth is both of these sayings are right and incredibly wise. The one you act upon, though, in this unscripted moment that I find myself in, it depends on which response might fit best. So here's the thing. Reading the situation, not simply the Bible, is what finding spiritual wisdom is all about. Wisdom isn't about flipping to that topical index at the back of the Bible and saying, okay, help me out here. Give me the sign, give me the word, give me the, you know, how many remember the good old days when you had a math textbook and at the back was all the answers? And you'd be working out, finally just say, just give me the answers and fill that in, whatever. We'd like to think the Bible's like that. It'll just spell out the answers. It doesn't do that. It doesn't do that at all. You see the point of that passage there in Proverbs 26 that says, don't answer them. Actually, maybe answer them. It's not telling you what to do. It wasn't designed to. It models something even greater. It gives you permission to think it through. to figure out what your response might be in this moment. And then after the fact, to learn from your experience. You had 2 choices. Or maybe you had 50 choices. And they're all allowed. Would you learn from them? Because it can work this way or it could work that way. What wisdom did you get from that experience? It's almost like the Bible's just going, come on, here's some options. Think it through. More than just giving us permission to try one or the other. These contradictions, they set up expectations that you do have to think it through. How many have ever heard people criticizing the Bible saying, oh man, that Bible's so full of contradictions? What if many of them are by design? And it's almost like the spiritual ancestors out there were saying life is much more complicated than just do this and do this. It's acknowledging the complexity and saying, oh man, you've got options. And I'm not about to tell you exactly how it goes down. You need to think about this. Take wealth, for example. Within the Bible, you'll read verses that talk about wealth as both a blessing and a curse, a security and a danger. It all depends. Proverbs 10 says, the wealth of the rich is their fortress, and the poverty of the poor is their ruin. Man, it's saying wealth is a good thing. But then Proverbs 18 says, the wealth of the rich starts the exact same way, is their strong city in their imagination. It's like a high wall in their imagination. These 2 verses, they force us to ponder with a proper attitude toward wealth, especially since, like the fool in the proverb earlier, they start the exact same way, but then they kind of go in 2 opposite directions. It's almost like these 2 verses are saying there's a very thin line about the genuine gratitude that we can feel for all the blessing, all the provision, all the things that we've obtained in life. There's a thin line between that and this arrogance that can develop for the things that we have in life. And the wisdom the Bible talks about says, be thinking about what relationship you have with wealth. And when you cross the line from gratitude over into arrogance, be very careful and be able to detect when all of a sudden you have crossed over that line. There's danger there. We need to use our heads, folks. Learn to read the situations we're in. See which wisdom fits best. Because I tell you, Proverbs doesn't do the heavy lifting for you. Sometimes we invest ourselves in reading, and we might find even a passage, a story. And then the question isn't so much, well, how would I apply that? The question is, does that even apply? Just because a verse talks about something that seems similar to our life doesn't mean it always necessarily can be applied in our lives. Sometimes the question is, does it even apply? Now, in my religious tradition, even suggesting that the Bible doesn't apply to everything in our lives is almost a violation. It's disloyal. It's rebellious toward the Bible. Around here, we believe it's a sacred responsibility to think deeply about the passages that we read before we just try to smack them on someone's life. Say, this is for you. See, spiritual wisdom isn't gained by just reading words on a page. It's about learning to read the moment. The day in, day out, gray situations that surface without warning. Here's the other thing about the Bible. Sometimes I said earlier, sometimes writers would write a story or they would write certain wise things, but they were writing them to a very particular situation and group of people at that time in that location. Very specific. It's like when you read Proverbs, you realize, man, this is very peculiar style of writing. Like, sometimes you realize, well, like Proverbs, for example. It wasn't written to 21st century Western church-going suburbanites like you and I. It wasn't. It's still confusing exactly who all wrote this thing, but likely they figure it was compiled for the purpose of training young, upper-class Israeli men for a life of royal service. That's why you'll find within it often themes talking about wealth, talking about justice. These were areas that were very applicable to these young people who were signing up for royal service. That's why it's addressed often to sons and not daughters. Centuries later, they took the book of Proverbs some men decided, let's put it into the Bible of Judaism, into the Hebrew Bible, the Old Testament. They decided to take this book that was written for a very particular group of people at a very particular group of time. They put it in the Bible, and now all of a sudden, they're saying this is for everyone. Whoa, okay. So now this wider audience is reading this and kind of going, well, this is interesting. How do we... So there's a transposition needed. You transpose it. Often Gregory, because he sings in a certain range, will listen to a song and say, I love that song, but it's not written for my range. I got to transpose it. I got to knock it up a couple of keys. I can't sing with Gregory. Man, my range is a little bit lower. But when he finds that range, boom, there it goes. This is what we often have to do with the Bible. We go, okay, it's saying these things. I gotta kind of take it from that age, thousands of years ago, written in that culture, and I gotta kind of transpose it to pull it out, to apply it to the 21st century here in Calgary in 2025. How do I do that? That is not easy. Just straight up. So when people say, oh, you just got to read the Bible, and I always get nervous when people come in over the years, when we'd be in church, there'd be people coming in, they'd be new to the whole thing, and someone would get them a Bible and say, hey, you got to just start reading that. I'd be like, you might want a few instructions just before you do that, because there's some work that needs to be done. But when you can do that, when you can learn the process of being able to take some of the stories, some of the writings, and extract them and bring them into the now, I'm telling you, when you can do that, the wisdom that starts to pop off the page. It's like all of a sudden this wisdom starts speaking, like holding our tongue in those circumstances when to open your mouth, things could go very sideways. I had 3 of those situations this last week. And wisdom was right there going, careful, careful. How we respond to someone's critique, their feedback. Oh, wisdom is saying, hang on. There's a way. Something starts going sideways. The patience, do I apply or do I just respond? You set a boundary for yourself, and wisdom is saying, honor the boundary. Honor, don't give in. Don't give. Wisdom can come out of these stories if applied properly. That can be powerful to your life if you can hear it and see it and transpose it. And when you do, man, wisdom has a way of leading to living in this world that brings peace and order and beauty. In fact, I'd go so far as to say wisdom, the wisdom that you can extract from the stories and writings of our ancestors, along with the everyday occurrences in our lives. When you can pull out and begin to realize, man, there is a better, it can change the world we live in. I believe it's the central point of spirituality, living wisely. Wisdom speaks to all parts of our lives in real time. Fairness, how to be fair, how to act with justice. Right now, we are watching some crazy, crazy events in our world right now. You're watching people speaking up going, that is not right. The way those people are being dealt with. Someone do something. Does anyone not see this injustice? Wisdom is calling for people to say, wake up, don't turn a blind eye to these things and to that, and watch out for that person over there under the boot of oppression. Speak up. Wisdom is talking. Self-discipline, how we raise families, a work ethic, moderation, humility, truthfulness, how to tell the truth, be honest, how to be a good friend, living in the moment. When Bryce this morning just said, shh, turn off everything and just be here. Living in the, these are all acts of wisdom. These are all the point of living deeply spiritual lives where you are deeply connected in a way that's changing your world around you. And the Bible is a part of a tradition that says, think deeply about how you're going to respond right there and right now. And if we can transpose it, this is why we don't abandon this book, because we believe it speaks wisdom. But it needs to be applied carefully. It can come out. And when it's transposed properly, can it speak? But man, I'm telling you, it takes a little work, a little elbow grease. That's why when someone says, well, just preach the Bible, just do what the Bible says, I go, sure. Easy for you to say. That kind of thinking leads people to a disconnection with that book. That's why here at Friends Church, we work hard at sorting through the various passages. There will be times when we will speak on certain topics that you will not find in the topical index at the back, that the people that wrote this thing hadn't yet experienced. Complexities of our life in the 21st century, they were not familiar with. And we can take a verse and we can kind of find the right translation and use only the particular to make it try to say something, makes it sound like the Bible says. There will be days when we will say, we think the Bible's rather silent on this topic. But there might be a grander principle that it speaks to. We can talk about that. But we're just not into making the Bible say things it don't say. Sometimes that rankles certain religious people. But we think if we're going to take this thing seriously, we're not going to make it say things it doesn't say. I guess the point of my message this morning is, this is a beautiful book, and sometimes it has contradicting stuff. Sometimes it's ambiguous. Sometimes it's ancient. But I'm telling you, if you can begin to learn how it acts and realize it's not just handing out answers, but it's asking you to think deeply on your own. That's why many times we'll talk about it, we'll raise questions, and we'll ask you, what's your move? You got some options this morning. This week, how are you going to respond? How are you going to parent? Are you going to give them the boot? I'm not suggesting that as, but I'm telling you, you got options as parents. And you're going to realize that even one approach for one child isn't the right one for another. And you need to use your own head. And you're going to use trial and error, and wisdom comes even out of that process. But be patient with this thing. Be willing to see it for what it was and to see the questions it was asking. And don't check your brain at the door. Spiritual work of discerning spiritual wisdom, it requires a lot of heavy lifting. For your day, for your week. I just want you to just think back this last week. Think about one situation you found yourself in that got you a little dysregulated. I'm betting there's at least one. Something that just maybe you lost your peace. What was going on there? Was it an unfulfilled desire? Was it a harsh word that someone spoke to you or that you kind of ended up saying to someone else? Was it a moment of panic or fear? Was it an offense that you took to something someone said? Maybe it was a worry about something that just got a little out of control. Every day we find ourselves challenged with what is the right, what is the wise move. And in finding spiritual wisdom, when we find those moments and we go, no, this is the right way. That is what leads to a more beautiful world. And I'm telling you, our spiritual ancestors have been experiencing those kinds of situations all throughout millennia. And they write their own stories to try to explain how they responded and what were the right ways. And if we can decode them, we can pull them out from time to time, we all benefit from it. So that's why you'll hear us speak from the Bible. Not as some answer book. Is it a life instruction manual? I don't know about that. But it has a lot of opportunity to gain spiritual wisdom. So, may you and may we be committed to doing the heavy work, taking things we've read, questions they've asked, stuff they've prescribed to very particular people at very particular times. And may we kind of look through that. May we be willing to and kind of say, does that work for me? How would that look for me today? May we be open to that. This year, as we dive into different stories and passages, stuff that just seems wild, may your hearts be open to see the questions and the emotions, the feelings, the wrestlings that they experienced. And may you join us in doing the heavy work of saying, how can it speak to me today, right now? Why? So that you will become a very spiritually wise person. How spiritually wise would you give yourself? What kind of marks would you give yourself on that? 5, 6 out of 10? 7? Lately, man, I made some bonehead mistakes. And I downgraded my scores. I need to work harder. It's my prayer for you. May we this year not shy away from the work, but may we embrace the challenge that leads to incredible wisdom. And not be shy of engaging with this thing at the same time.